We begin here in Germany, where Friedrich Merz has suffered a huge setback in his bid to become chancellor. After a first ballot by lawmakers in the German parliament, he failed to get enough votes to be elected as chancellor. That's despite his new coalition having a slim majority. Merz needed 316 votes, but got only 310. The ballot is secret, so we don't know how lawmakers voted, but in a test ballot this morning, he did have a majority. Party consultations are now underway ahead of an expected second round of voting in the coming days. Well, here's how Bundestag President Julia Klöckner announced the outcome of the vote just a short while ago.
The interrupted session has now resumed, and I will announce the results of the vote. Number of members, 630. Votes cast, 621. Invalid ballots, 1. 310 members voted yes, 307 voted no, and there were 3 abstentions. MP Friedrich Merz has not achieved the required majority of at least 316 votes. In accordance with Article 63, paragraph 2 of the Constitution, he has not been elected Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Let's cross straight over to our political editor, Michaela Köfner. She's down at the Parliament where that vote took place this morning that left Friedrich Merz not becoming Chancellor. Michaela, this is a huge shock. Try to put this in context for us. What just happened?
Well, what happened is a very public humiliation and failure for Friedrich Merz, who was pretty certain that he would get the votes required to become Chancellor, and then was exposed as someone who doesn't have his own political camp fully on his own side. And that is a shock to absolutely everyone. I've spoken to a lot of people who now, even people who never wanted Friedrich Merz to become Chancellor, were shocked by this outcome. Nobody really expected that. And that leads one to also suspect that maybe those individuals who chose not to vote for him, and they appear to be from within his own political camp, because he didn't make that majority needed, which he comfortably had, maybe they even didn't know what impact they would have. Maybe there was one or the other individual who thought, well, with 12 votes, potential votes more than absolutely necessary to get those 316, they could afford not to give him essentially 100% backing from his own political camp. But all of this is speculation. And we can be fairly sure, I've spoken to people involved in these proceedings, they're 99.9% sure that we will not see a second vote here today. But until everything is official, because this morning we were very sure that Friedrich Merz will get elected, we're going to hold out and keep you updated what happens.
This is uncharted territory, Michaela. This has never happened in post-war Germany. Everyone is wondering, what happened and what does this mean? Why has it happened and what does it mean? What sort of reactions are you hearing from people there at the Parliament, from members of Parliament or other people that are there?
Well, the reactions kind of vary from glee to people honestly concerned about the damage this is doing to Germany's reputation as a force for stability. And a short while ago, I spoke to Alice Weidel, the co-leader of the far-right Alternative for Germany party, about her take on what happened and what conclusions she draws from that. Let's just take a listen to that. Frau Weidel, wie große Überraschung ist es
Ms.
für Sie?
Weidel, how surprising is it for you? It's a big surprise for us that Friedrich Merz was not elected in the first round. Well, naturally, this is a historic defeat for Friedrich Merz. He is so damaged now by this, and this so-called government coalition is one that has just been a ruin from the very beginning. And the fact that Merz can't even get the support of his own people, what kind of government is this going to be if from the very beginning he can't be elected? And he's so incredibly damaged by this that really the sensible thing to do would be to take a step back and withdraw. He cannot become a chancellor after this. No one will take him seriously. And is this a reason for the AfD to be pleased about? Not at all. I mean, it damages the reputation of this country. We criticized it when the past coalition imploded, that they didn't work properly, that we missed so many parliamentary session weeks. The country is just declining economically. We've got the highest energy prices worldwide. I mean, what's happening here? The economic damage alone is enormous, and we have to stop this. We need decent politics for the well-being of the country, and to just have the left-wing coalition agreement that we have. The SPD has essentially determined all of it, a party that was voted in by 16 people. I mean, the country voted completely differently. It's a fraud. It's electoral fraud. This was a call from the above that lying doesn't pan out. I've never experienced anyone breaking as many electoral promises as Friedrich Merz did, and he has no character, no principles. Friedrich Merz cannot become the chancellor of this country, and that's what the parliament proved today. So you really believe that this was something that had to be? I mean, when you say it is almost a voice from above, is that what you think? Yes, I do. I believe there is a higher order, higher justice, and this is what allows me to be serene. Though I have to say that even I, today, did not expect this to happen, and I think this is a very clear sign. Friedrich Merz is too damaged. We should leave it. Many of his critics see him as damaged because he worked together with the AfD to get a majority for the motion in Parliament, and he was criticized for that a great deal. Essentially, was this not someone you could have spoken to earlier? Not Friedrich Merz, absolutely not. I mean, he criticized us. He got very ad hominem, and he's the biggest electoral fraudster of all time. We cannot support him. If the CDU has the idea to present a different chancellor candidate, then we would discuss that internally, whether or not we would support them or not. But on the whole, we do not want an SPD-CDU government. That's not what the electorate voted for. If you look at Lars Klingbeil, he's supposed to be vice-chancellor and finance minister. I mean, he has nothing in his CV that supports that. He's never worked in his whole life. He hasn't got any idea about anything. He's been an anti-fascist, okay, but I mean, you know, this is just not something that you can sell this country. People with no training, and they're supposed to set the rules of the country. So this is your assessment of things. Well, it's the truth. But do you think there is a CDU chancellor candidate that the AfD would support? Well, this is the CDU's problem, and it's a strategic problem. You know, they've gone into a left-wing dead end. We see the results. Thank you, Ms. Weidel.
So the co-leader of the far-right AfD party there, Alice Weidel, that's what she was saying to you earlier. Michaela, the far-right AfD, it must be said, was just classified as a right-wing extremist party by Germany's domestic intelligence agency, for any of our viewers who may not have caught that. She said, just listening there, she referred to Friedrich Merz as an electoral fraudster, spoke of a higher justice. This is the co-leader of the largest opposition party in Parliament. What do we make of that?
Well, I found it quite striking. This is the first time, and I've spoken to her many times, interviewed her many times, that she made a reference to a higher force that is behind her. And I find the similarity between this new rhetoric and the way the US President Donald Trump is portraying himself rather striking. We know that the AfD is being actively backed by the Trump administration, by several figures there, and we also saw a lot of pushback and condemnation that the far-right AfD has now been labeled as extremist by domestic intelligence, which says it has gathered enough evidence to support that, particularly based on their take on different types of German citizenship. They feel that Muslims can never really be part of German society. So that's somewhat of a side issue, but this rhetoric of a higher force is completely new, and I think it's something that we need to absolutely watch out for as these events evolve and much further down the line. And at the same time, she makes a couple of points which will also strike a chord with Merz's inner party critics, and that is many have in a way not forgiven him for the poor election result of the conservative CDU-CSU from within his own camp. The CDU-CSU landed at 28.5%. The expectation was more at like 30 plus, and there was a feeling that his decision to allow the far-right AfD party for the first time to deliver majority to the Conservatives in the parliament on a non-binding motion, that was crossing a red line. So many feel strongly about that. And when Alice Weidel called him a fraud, well, many people accuse Friedrich Merz of having broken his word on taking on new debt. And he did indeed now write and pen out an exemption from the debt break, which is enshrined in the German constitution, has therefore a lot of cash on the table, 500 billion to spend on infrastructure, no ceiling anymore in theory on defense spending. So he would come into office with his funds all lined up, and that's something that the past government broke apart over. Having said all of that, now we're in this procedural moment, and here now, if they want a second vote, the CDU, CSU and the Social Democrats need the other parties to play ball. And I've heard from everyone I've spoken to that nobody would stand in the way. So at the same time, we need to wait and see. And it doesn't look like the Conservative CDU, CSU and the Social Democrats want to do this again today, because then they would be obliged to follow up with another vote instantly if that one was to fail as well. So this is a hurdle that they don't seem willing to take today. And the other option would be either tomorrow, then there's a public holiday here Thursday, or on Friday.
All eyes are on Friedrich Merz now, Michaela. How much political damage has he suffered from this?
Look, it's a slap in the face. If the second vote goes through smoothly, I'm sure we will talk about this as a hiccup. It really depends on how the history is written from here onwards. If his government fails to deliver, then this will be seen as the bad omen that foretold his failure. If he moves on from this, if he does become elected and he manages to turn the economy around and keep the far-right AfD at bay, it will be perceived as a hiccup on that bumpy and very long road for Friedrich Merz to becoming German chancellor. These kinds of stories are always written in hindsight. Right now, it is a major blow. And this is clearly also something Friedrich Merz will have to recover from. But he has to do that fast.
Michaela, thank you very much. Our chief political editor, Michaela Köfner at the German Bundestag. And with me in the studio is Richard Walker, our chief international editor. He's been following this, of course, all along. Richard, what do we know about why this happened? We know that the vote was anonymous, right, in the parliament, so we can't say who voted how. But what reasons might whoever voted against Friedrich Merz from within his own party and from within his coalition partner, how did this come about?
Yeah, so first of all, we should, of course, and as Michaela just said there, we're in the realm of speculation because this was a secret ballot, as you said. We don't know. There aren't, we cannot expect the people who failed to vote for Merz from his own party or from the Social Democrats to sort of come out and explain it. They're probably keeping their heads down right now. But so we're in the realm of speculation. I think there there are two kind of potential categories of decision that may lie behind that. One would be give him a message that his power is not unfettered, so kind of a warning shot for people either in the Social Democrats or the Conservatives who might not like aspects of his policy or the way he's gone about things. On the Social Democrats, that might be in terms of his migration policy, the way he deals with the AfD, the far-right party we've just been talking about. On the Conservative side, it might be because they feel that he's made too many concessions towards the Social Democrats. Or we heard Alice Weidel there, the leader of the AfD, saying that he's a left-wing Conservative, so that he's moved too far to the left on things like public spending, ratcheting up borrowing in Germany, which has always been a politically testy area. So it could be that in either of those parties, people thought, OK, let's just send him a warning shot. He's got enough votes to get over, but we don't want him to feel that it's completely plain sailing. So that's one category. The other category could be members of those parties who simply do not want this coalition. It could be members of the Christian Democrats, the Conservatives, who think it would be better, for instance, to attempt to have a minority government, which there's been some discussion about in recent months, about whether the Conservatives could govern from a minority position. It could be Social Democrats who think that it's just wrong for the Social Democrats to go into yet another of these. They've done many of these so-called grand coalitions with the Conservatives, which they feel is damaging the party. So again, underline. All speculation, but these are kind of potential scenarios. If it falls into the category of warning shot, then we can expect Merz, if there is a second round, to do better. And he's only 6 votes short of what he needs. So if it is a warning shot, we can probably expect him to get through a second vote if and when it takes place. If it's people who really just simply do not want this coalition, then we really are in uncharted territory, because that could suggest that he fails even a second vote. That would probably be curtains for Merz politically, although constitutionally there can be repeated votes. It's unlikely that he would survive that politically, because it would be such a signal of his inability to unite these parties. So I think these are the scenarios that people are thinking about right now.
German voters, other countries who trade with Germany, rely on Germany within various alliances, are looking to Germany and waiting for the next government to get in place so they can move forward on some major foreign policy issues, also economic policies. What can they expect? What should we be expecting, Richard, in terms of how this is going to unfold from here? What are the scenarios?
So we have a period of limbo, and we don't know how long it's going to take. Chancellor Scholz of the outgoing government is still officially in office, at least in a working capacity. So they have not yet been relieved of office by the president, which would be the next step when the new government comes in. So Olaf Scholz, if he was planning a holiday tomorrow, he's going to have to put that off, because basically there has to be a government. So there's a government in a working capacity that remains in place. We'll see if a second round of voting takes place with Friedrich Merz. If he gets through that, it could be tomorrow, it could be later in the week. If he gets through that, then at least the new government comes into place, and then it can get down to business. It will be damaged, but how much that damage really tarnishes it long term will depend on how it performs, as we just heard from Michaela. If, for instance, if Merz fails in the second round, then we're really in uncharted territory. I mean, there are various conceivable scenarios. The Conservatives could put up a different candidate for Chancellor and see what kind of test the waters for that candidate. Other parties, anybody could put up a potential candidate. That's very unlikely to get elected. Or the president might think, all right, this is not working. We need to have fresh elections. And if that happens, then of course, well, it's been 6 months since the last coalition broke up, leading the way to those last set of elections, which took place earlier this year. If there were yet another set of elections, then this political limbo and uncertainty would drag on even further. And I mean, this would raise even deeper questions about the political stability of Germany, which has, for decades been seen as one of the most stable countries politically in Europe. And I think those are the kind of stakes that people who didn't support Merz will probably be thinking about right now. You know, do I want to, do I dislike him enough to bring about that kind of potential crisis for Germany? So, I'm sure there'll be a fair amount of soul searching going on right now. But those are some of the scenarios. And it's certainly worrying for European partners in particular, who were really kind of raring to go with a new government here, and now thinking, OK, is Merz all we thought he was?
High drama in the German parliament today. Richard Walker, our chief international editor, thank you. Well, Richard mentioned the president, that would be Frank-Walter Steinmeier, and he has a role to play in all of this as well. Our political correspondent, Matthew Moore, is at Schloss Bellevue. That's the official office and residence of the German president. And that's where Friedrich Merz was expected to receive his official credentials as chancellor today, but things didn't turn out that way. Matthew, this is a shock, obviously, for all of us. You're following reactions there. What are you hearing?
That's right, Terry. I mean, at this very moment in time, according to the old schedule, Friedrich Merz should be in the room next door with his entire cabinet raising a glass. But that's not the case. And what we're hearing actually in the last few minutes is that there's still hope here that a vote will be held today. The Bundespresident, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, has held crisis talks with his personal staff here in his private office, and he's also been in touch with figures in the parties over at the Bundestag. And what we're hearing is that a vote may still take place today. It requires the backing of all the parties in the Bundestag, and there's still hope that that could happen. But as you say, the reaction has been one of really dumbfoundment, people scratching their heads, questions about what exactly the path ahead is indeed. We know that a vote has to take place within the next 14 days, and if that doesn't happen, then Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the president, will step in. But it's really just, as we've heard throughout this, it's uncharted territory, and people are just waiting to see what the political parties over in the Bundestag, which is not far from here, what they finally agree on after all the talks that are going on at the moment. But the situation here is still one that there's plenty of journalists still here, and they're still prepared, and they're still expecting that it could potentially still happen today.
The German president is head of the German state. He has a largely ceremonial role, but today he has a very important role, Matthew, trying to figure out where things go from here. Are we expecting any statements from President Steinmeier today?
Look, what I'm hearing is that he will not make a statement unless a vote does not take place in the coming days, or if a second vote were to fail, then he would make a statement. But the fact is, they don't want to ratchet up the drama and to make this even more of a crisis. What his job is to set the tone, is to calm down the debate and the atmosphere and the mood in the country. And so there's a wariness that by making a speech too prematurely, that could actually have the opposite effect. What they're saying really is essentially that this is all written in the Constitution, it's all regulated there in the rule book, and it's a case for the lawyers and the experts to pore over the details and follow the rules, because it's there in the rule book. Having said that, we know that a lot of it is coming down to those negotiations between the parties as to whether or not they will have a second vote today, tomorrow, or on Friday, because there is a bank holiday here in Germany on Thursday, so it won't be on Thursday. But as we say, it's uncharted territory, and there are so many moving parts, and a big question about whether or not that will happen. But at the moment, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the president, is still prepared to hand over the credentials and appoint a new chancellor today or tomorrow if necessary, or later this week. But at the moment, no plans to give a speech to try to address this constitutional crisis that is taking place here.
Matthew, thank you very much. DW's Matthew Moore down at the Schloss Bellevue. Thank you very much. Well, let's get the reaction from Brussels now. Our correspondent, Rosie Berchard, is standing by there. Rosie, what are you hearing from European lawmakers?
So far, I've heard European lawmakers call this a real shock and even a clap of thunder. Now, let's be clear, when it comes to official European governments, they're keeping their lips sealed because this is seen currently as a German domestic issue. But when you talk to diplomats and elected members of the European Parliament, there we are seeing a lot of head scratching and indeed shock. For example, the head of the centrist political grouping in the European Parliament, Valerie Hayer, has been talking about the need for a strong and ambitious Germany in order for the European Union to move forward in any way. And she said that Merz had promised to prioritise Europe and to give a sort of German comeback when it comes to European Union policy making. Indeed, that was one of the key complaints that I heard over and over again from sources, diplomats here in Brussels over the last few years about the outgoing German administration, that there simply wasn't enough clarity and stability in the German position. And when you don't have a clear line from Germany on things like Ukraine support, on things like how to deal with the US, on things like relations with China, well, it's very hard for the European Union to have its own position. So I would say a very sharp intake of breath here in Brussels here this morning, and that will likely not be anything like a sigh of relief until German lawmakers have done their job and decided what happens next.
Friedrich Merz was planning to visit Paris and Warsaw as his first foreign trips as chancellor. Of course, he still may do that. He may soon be elected still. He was hoping to underline the importance of the political relationship between Germany, France, and Poland. Are these plans thrown into disarray now?
They're certainly thrown into doubt. It's hard to see right now how they could take place. But as you said, and as our other correspondents there in Berlin have been pointing out, it's just so unclear at the moment where exactly the politics are headed and where exactly then Friedrich Merz will be headed. But one thing which was high on the agenda was to show the importance, particularly of that partnership with France. It's often called here in Brussels the Franco-German engine, these two big political heavyweights in the European Union that are the driving force for what the European Union is about and what it does. And that's been very much thrown into doubt by the uncertainty in Germany over the last few years, and now even more so today, but also by France's own domestic political issues. And, you know, it's important to note here that while this particular situation is really uncharted territory for Germany, these kind of political uncertainties or democratic issues, coalition breakups, etc., are not totally uncommon across the European Union. We have a lot of parliamentary democracies here in Europe with more proportional voting systems, which mean you tend to have a lot of different parties that have to work together, and that can create a lot of political hiccups. But it matters more when it happens in Germany because of Germany's weight that it brings into the European Union as the European Union's biggest economy, and that is something that we'll be waiting to see whether or not Friedrich Merz will show up in Paris as Chancellor, of course, very much still to be confirmed based on what happens domestically in Berlin, never mind in Paris and Warsaw.
And I would just add that Friedrich Merz himself was a member of the European Parliament at the beginning of his career. Rosie Berchard in Brussels, thank you very much.